This is Perfectly Imperfect, Navigating Perfectionism and Procrastination. It's the Wellness Hub workshop for tonight, which is April 14th. But in any case, let's us begin our workshop. Before I start sharing my slide and all of that, if since we're such a small group, if we don't mind, just maybe a couple of, a couple of statements, a couple of sentences of why this topic was interesting to you, or why you felt like, yeah, I'd like to learn more about that, if you feel like it. So I'll just go in the order of the names here if you'd like to share. And if not, that's totally fine. Just send me a quick message. But let's see here. You know what? Actually, whoever feels most ready, just use your hand icon. Who wants to go first? Tammy? All right. So just unmute. Perfect.
So I'm here especially for the procrastination part.
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
to admit, since menopause, my procrastination's gotten worse. Honestly,
Yeah.
I just don't feel like doing anything after work, even though I used to have so many hobbies. And it's like,
Yes.
oh yeah, do it later. I'll do it later. I'll do it later. I never
Yeah.
actually get
Yeah.
around to it. I have
Yes.
pushed myself
Very
to do
common.
it.
Yeah.
Perfectionism was something that when I was younger was a problem, but now it's the
Mm-hmm.
procrastination that's more of a problem.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Yes, and that's actually very common. And I like how you tied that into getting older as well, just the ability cognitively to kind of hold different things to multitask efficiently, or even to have the energy to do so is something that is commonly shared among women, that there seems to be kind of this dip in energy, and certainly the ability to kind of plan, which is a big part of, executing something, is the planning. So procrastination becomes an easy alternative, right? It's so much easier to say, I'll do it later. I'll catch up to it. It'll happen. It gives us a little bit of relief in the moment. So I do understand that. All right. Who would like to share next? Matter.
I'll go next.
Sure, sure. Yes.
I'm a perfectionist, and I hadn't correlated procrastination with menopause, but I think there's definitely, but I would say maybe more a little bit of an energy decline and
Yes.
having to manage a smaller amount of energy for the interests and things that I have to do. So it's like after work, and
Mm-hmm.
the energy is mostly gone. So
Yes. Yeah.
we'll just sit in front of YouTube and watch the videos that I actually want to make instead of making them.
Right.
So but
Yes.
yeah, so I get very perfectionist,
Mm-hmm.
I'm wanting to start a YouTube channel for sewing. And it's like, well,
Amazing.
I don't know how to edit and I
Right.
really don't have the bandwidth to do it. But they talk about being able to
Mm,
do it without editing. And it's like,
yeah.
but that doesn't look good. So I'm not doing it.
Right. Okay. I'm so glad you used that as an example, because I think midway through my presentation, we talk about some of the thoughts that lead to the procrastination, kind of the very common ways of thinking that perfectionistic type people have. And they have found that what you just said, they're kind of like, well, I'm not really sure, and I don't like it, or it's not going to be good. That's one of them, right? So kind of putting it off until it's just so is a byproduct of that perfectionism. So that's a great example. And that sounds cool. The sewing YouTube channel. Is that what you said? Sewing or knitting? Sewing. See? Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And then finally, Sharon, hello.
Thanks so much, Angela, for this. And
Mhm.
yeah, unfortunately I fit into I fit into the type A perfectionist group.
Yeah.
And I was hoping really that I would get some kind of hints and tips on how really not to set such high expectations for my
Mm-hmm.
staff, particularly, and
Yeah.
also for students. I do
Okay.
tend to find that when we speak of procrastination, I find that quite difficult. to understand, because I am a
Mm-hmm.
perfectionist and I do like what I do and I do work hard at that, and it's
Yep.
hard to stop. Um,
Yes.
I do have a lot of, well, not a lot of hobbies, but I have, major hobby, which
Mm-hmm.
is embroidery,
I
sewing. You
see
can see
that.
it
Yeah.
here. Um,
Yeah.
so that's my get out of my head into my hands kind of
Mm-hmm.
deal.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't do that, then yes, I would work all
Mm-hmm.
the time. And as I'm
Right.
coming up to retirement, I'm kind of, thinking,
Mm-hmm.
should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And it's hard to kind of think about that, because when when you are a perfectionist, you
Mm-hmm.
want to think you can continue to do that. And
Right.
you can't, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't. Your
It's not
body doesn't let
sustainable.
you, or
That's true.
your mind doesn't let, your brain won't
Right.
let you.
Yes.
But I do find that, and I don't want to be so not gender, but sort of generation specific.
Mm-hmm.
But I find in nursing that we are seeing a trend to more students not being in the same mindset
Mm-hmm.
as we are as older nurses. And I'm talking about me and my team. And that's
Right.
very
Right.
difficult for us. We've had
Yes,
to
I can
find
believe
ways
so.
to navigate to
Mm-hmm.
help students be able to be on time,
Yeah.
to be able to deliver care on time,
Mm-hmm.
to be
Mm-hmm.
able to give a medication on time. You
Yes.
can't procrastinate, right? You
You
can't do
cannot
that.
procrastinate on that. And it's
So,
difficult. And I'm glad you
yeah.
used mindset. I'm glad you
Mm,
used that word mindset. Why? Because we are going to talk about certain mindsets that do set people up for what we call kind of that perseverance, that grit,
mm,
that ability to one. And two, I really appreciate how you self-identify of like, you know what, I'm perfectionistic.
mm,
And there are different ways that that comes out, especially when it comes to others, because you can have an ocean of empathy, but when somebody doesn't show up on time or they don't do what they're supposed to do, you can't that doesn't
mm.
kind of that does you cannot understand that in a way that is logical to you. It's kind of like, what, it's your job. That's all you need to
Yep.
know. There's no strategies, there's no tools, there's nothing here but for you to know that that's what was supposed to happen. That was your responsibility, period. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when people are
Yeah.
procrastinating, you think, and I'm in the same boat of like, but how could you? That was
Yeah.
required of you.
That's right. I can. Yeah. I
How?
just can't. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
and so that kind of segues nicely to why I'm presenting this as well, because I am somebody, I never knew this was a term. I had no idea this was in vocabulary. It's called a precrastinator. So there's a procrastinator. So there's such a thing. I'm a precrastinator, which means the minute that something is supposed to be done or I learn that there's, a task or responsibility, for some reason, if I have time or I feel like, oh, this is manageable, I do it immediately. 9 times out of 10, this is a good quality, right? 9 times out of 10, this is something where it's like, wow, she's so on it. She emails people back right away. She hands in the report, da da da. But there is 1 out of 10 where if I just would have taken a beat, if I would have taken a breath, if I would have waited a couple of days, it would have been a non action. It would have been like you never had to do that actually, or it resolved itself, or you never had to email that person, or you shouldn't have driven there to go check out the thing. It wasn't necessary. But I have an issue of the opposite. So I'm very fascinated by procrastination because it makes me physically uncomfortable to wait. I think fast, I move fast, I want it to do it.
Mm.
But my husband, so we have partners, sometimes as spouses, he is a procrastinator. So he finds me very fascinating and how I do everything immediately. And I can't really understand how he puts things off. So I thought for my own, you know, for our own marriage, for our sake, I should do some research on this topic to understand a little bit more, kind of as a personal note. And then academically, obviously working at the college, in my role being a facilitator myself, it's really important to learn more about, that procrastination, that perfectionism, how it comes out, how it is expressed in students, and then how do we support a different way of thinking that is a little bit more conducive to success success and balance. Because as Sharon pointed out, being perfectionistic, I mean, it's great in many, many ways. Things get done, but it's not totally sustainable, over time. And it does lead to kind of, some difficulty or sometimes feeling like it's hard to it's hard to understand how other people aren't that way. So it leads to a little bit of some criticism or judgment of others. Not in a negative way, but it's hard. It's hard sometimes to understand. So yes, and I see Chantel. Hello, welcome. Hi.
Hi,
Uh,
thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming. Welcome. We were just going around because we're such a small group, and I decided before I jump into my slides and this and that, just wanted to learn a little bit about what interested you about this topic specifically, or how did you find yourself here?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much,
Mhm.
Angela. And sorry,
Yeah.
I popped on and then had to take a off. I was ripping home from my daughter's gymnastics,
Oh,
so I needed to pop back on.
yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you. I
Hmm.
actually I ask a sim I like to do attendance questions when I teach. I'm a facilitator in the PN program, and one of the
Yeah.
questions I like to ask my students is how do you like to procrastinate?
Ooh,
It's really interesting.
yes, I love it.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
fun. It's lots of Netflix or
Hmm.
sleeping or cleaning is generally like the
Yeah.
go-tos for
Yes.
procrastination.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, I find for myself, I can show you what I did for today. I like a to-do list.
Wow. Yeah.
I find if
Yeah.
I do something like this,
Hmm.
I don't procrastinate. It's just like, no, I need to get it done and do my to-do
Hmm.
list. So I try really
Yeah.
hard to not
Excellent.
procrastinate. Yeah.
Yes. Good. Well, thank you for sharing. And that's such a great question. I never thought I facilitate as well in the EA and the HSPD program
Okay.
for about 6 years now. And I've never thought to, because I know they all do. And trust me, I get,
Yeah.
questions about extensions the night before. I get late things,
Mhm.
this and that.
Mhm.
And certainly procrastination is underfoot. So I should ask that question too, because we're all doing it. Not Sharon and I, but others are doing it.
I think I've learnt over age that sometimes, I just have to sleep on one thing. I just have to
Yes.
wait. And you're right, Angela, sometimes
Hmm.
it can resolve itself.
Yeah.
I mean, Chantal works with me, obviously, so she
Hmm.
knows the way that I operate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have learnt that over the
Hmm.
years.
Exactly. It
Step
is.
back, Sharon. Don't
That's
reply.
right. Step
Yeah.
back.
Okay.
Yes, step back. Absolutely. And that is a learning curve. I think it's through experience because
Yeah,
I
it
really
is.
thought there's no
Yeah,
other way to be. And now that I've gotten older and I've had enough experiences where I think like, yes, sleep on it.
yeah,
Nothing will
yeah.
change if you don't answer now, if you don't do it
Yeah.
now.
Mhm.
I have learned that and I'm getting better. I have to say, I definitely have caught myself about to send the email or do it. And I think, oh, nope, stop. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
And I
All right.
and I let it go. I let it go. Yeah. All right. The agenda, of course, just to go over and to reflect. So two parts of this. It's kind of an interesting, this is the way I've been doing my workshops for the Wellness Hub. I like first to reflect on ourselves to have a better understanding of, our thoughts and feelings around the topic, and even to, apply it to our own way of being, thinking, behaving, all that stuff. And then I do like, so I guess that's the first part, understanding perfectionism, just thinking about, what it is, how does it impact how people behave and make decisions, and then reflect on your own perfectionistic tendencies if you have them. And this is not an assumption that we're all here because we're all perfectionistic. It's just to think about where would you land maybe on that scale. The part two, though, which I always do with all my workshops, I like to extend that to students, right? So thinking about, I know this about myself. I learned a little bit about the theories around it, the ideas behind it, and now knowing this, how can I best support students who I do see procrastinating, maybe out of perfectionism, maybe not. We all know that procrastination isn't always because somebody is perfectionistic. But it tends to go hand in hand, but there are other reasons as well. So then applying that to students is the second part I was hoping to touch on with you guys. So jumping right into just straight up I think we all have an understanding of what perfectionism is. All of my slides are empirically validated. They're all from research based. I have my references at the last slide. So this is what I found about perfectionism, that there is an adaptive perfectionism and there is a maladaptive perfectionism, of course. So when it is adaptive, this is a person that strives for excellence, right? They're motivated, they're productive. Oftentimes, individuals with this adaptive type of perfectionism have higher academic achievement and are personally satisfied because they are seeing the outcome of that perfectionism as being beneficial, right? So they're seeing like, nope, I don't let things slide. I don't let things be just so. I do the absolute best and I expect that of myself. Okay. It becomes maladaptive though when that same type of thinking can turn into excessive self-criticism, fear of failure, and then setting unrealistic goals, right? So just almost like unrealistic being like, I never get, and it might be realistic to this person if they've never gotten less than an A plus. But let's say, things change, you're in a different subject, you're getting to a more challenging grade, and you still decided, no, since grade 9, I've never had less than an A plus. You might get to grade 12 calculus, which the average for the whole class is a B minus, and that same person will say, nope, A plus is me though. That's what I do. That becomes maladaptive because you are setting yourself up for a lot of anxiety around achieving something that has been told to you. This is kind of impossible. A teacher who's been teaching for 20 years saying nobody has ever gotten more than a B minus in my class ever. And then you say, it'll be me. I'm going to be the A plus. That's a lot of undue pressure and stress. Obviously, the maladaptive type of perfectionism can lead to anxiety, depression, and then the whole purpose of the presentation, that procrastination, right? It would seem interesting that somebody who's perfectionistic would not, be procrastinating because they only do excellent things. They're only achieving the highest. But if you set up such a high threshold for success that you even, let's say it even subconsciously is too high, you might not do it, right? It might just be like, okay, and it's so interesting. There are studies that have shown that people actually physically might get ill because psychologically they cannot contend with the failure. So they might get strep throat. They might get a flu. They might suddenly be bedridden for 3 days right before a really important presentation, you name it. And the connection still isn't there. They're just thinking like, oh man, I couldn't do it. I couldn't show up to write my exam. I was so sick. It was the escape of having to be in that situation where they would not perform. Absolutely 100%. So that does happen. Okay, so a little bit more on perfectionism and its consequences. So that's kind of the general idea, adaptive, maladaptive, we understand that. Looking at types of perfectionism, which when we did our introductions, I heard a couple different types of perfectionism. So there is self-oriented, there is other-oriented, and there is socially prescribed. So exactly how it sounds, self-oriented is imposing high standards on yourself. This usually comes first, which leads to other, imposing high standards on others, right? Because of that first step where you're putting that on yourself. And then socially prescribed is perceiving that others impose without being spoken, without somebody directly saying, I expect this of you. You have decided that also society or others are expecting you to be the best and are watching you actually. And if you do fail, it's very embarrassing and shameful because, and that can come from your own parents, that's socially, right? It can come from your own parents, that can extend to your superiors, your bosses, that can extend to your community. More times than not, most people that say, oh, I'm a perfectionistic person has a self-oriented perfectionism. Then most of them also have the other oriented. Not everybody has the socially prescribed, however. So that's the only one that's a little bit smaller in percentage than the other two. Okay. So I wanted to show you something that I've been using the language here as a little bit of a disguise or a trick. So perfectionism is almost more times than not, when we look at the research, it is a personality type. It's a way of being. So somebody, some people are very talkative, extroverted, rambunctious, energetic. Those are things that are kind of qualities of a personality type. Perfectionism is, but a fixed mindset is not. So perfectionism actually can be discussed or even thought about as a fixed mindset in disguise. So what is a fixed mindset? Just a quick show of hands. Has anybody heard of a fixed mindset, that language before? Yes? Okay. Okay, so the fixed mindset is exactly what perfectionism is. And if you start to, I'm getting ahead of myself, as I go through the slides thinking about, we're going to reach the opposite of a fixed mindset. So if we think of what is a fixed mindset, why is it like perfectionism? What could possibly be the opposite of a fixed mindset? So first, let's look at this. So I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? It's kind of a funny thing. I'm giving you examples here. So the self is in terms of fixed, right? If I can't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all. So it assumes ability is fixed, avoids challenge to protect self-image, right? So there is a type, it's not everybody, but perfectionistic people kind of know their sweet spot. They know where they can shine, they know where they excel, and like anybody, you kind of go to that place because you want to do well. Different from most people, though, a perfectionistic person will actively not put themselves in situations where they might be challenged or exposed is not being the best. So they might actively avoid, and it doesn't have to be something monumental, like it could be something as silly as bowling, right? So it's something that they know, I don't like bowling, I don't enjoy it, I have a hard time, it's not fun for me because I'm so bad and I never get better. Other people would think, who cares? It's just bowling. But to the perfectionistic person, I'm actually not going to put myself in a situation where I'm going to demonstrate that to anybody else. Two, the other oriented perfectionism sounds like this. I expect others to get it right the first time, right? Views mistakes as a sign of incompetence in others, right? Sometimes, again, nobody is black and white this way, but there's kind of an undertone or this core belief kind of like, well, you should have done it right the first time. There's this um, almost a default to the disappointment of, I can't believe you messed up, right? It's hard for me to really get that. Um, it might discourage learning through failure, right? And then socially prescribed perfectionism is, if I mess up, people will think I'm not smart enough, right? So it shows the belief that worth is tied to flawless performance. Fear of judgment blocks the effort, right? So again, it's an expression of a core of who I am. Instead of it being a behavior, a skill set, things that actually can be developed, it is an extension of me. I'm a failure. I'm bad. And other people are going to see that and go, oh, what an awful, I can't believe how bad that was. That's too much for a perfectionistic person. Okay. Looking at any of these, and if anybody feels like sharing, and we can do two parts too. I was thinking, if this doesn't really apply to you and you're like, yeah, I can see this, I understand what you're talking about, but I don't really feel that way or I've never experienced that. Thinking and reflecting about perhaps family members, students, loved ones, spouses. Has anybody either thought these things, experienced being on the receiving end of these types of thinking, or notice this in any students or anyone and would like to share? Yes, Chantal.
Yeah, so I feel like the self-oriented perfectionism speaks to me for sure.
Mhm.
My husband's from France and he speaks French, and our daughter's 3 and she goes to a francophone daycare, and he only speaks
Amazing.
to her.
Okay.
I don't speak French despite my very French name.
Okay. Yes.
And I think that has to do with my self-oriented perfectionism. It's exactly
Interesting.
your line there. Like if I can't do
Hmm.
it perfectly, I'm just not going
Hmm.
to, just because he's my husband. Like I shouldn't be nervous about if I
Yes.
mess up or have the
Hmm.
wrong tone or accent, etc. But it's just like
Hmm.
this big like mental block for me to just
Yeah.
take that step and do it.
Hmm.
Like I have my little Duolingo app and my little owl is a skeleton because so long. It's yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that one
That's a
spoke to me for sure.
perfect. And you know what? That's a perfect example because it's exactly what happens is that idea of like, that fear and it's not rational, by the way. This is all emotion, right? So it's not
Exactly.
rational that you're thinking, oh, my husband's going to judge me and he's going to think I'm the worst. Of course not. But emotionally, your brain can't distinguish the two feelings, right? It's just a
Mhm.
fear response. It's very cerebral. It's just, it's kind of this, yeah, it's this gut reaction of this is going to be embarrassing and I rather not experience that. There's a lot of anxiety around it, so I'm just not going to. It's
Yeah.
protective. It's
Yes.
protective. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
thank you for sharing.
No.
Tammy.
So for myself, I have been on the receiving end.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to do things perfectly, but it's never stopped me. I never had that. If I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. No, it just makes me
Yeah.
work harder. So it never had stopped me. But I've
Mm.
had my parents
Yeah.
put
They're
that
usually the
strain on me
ones.
that you
Yeah.
must get an A in everything, and if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble, kind of thing. So I've
Yeah.
always had that from my folks when I was high school, that kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I do see the self-oriented perfectionism, I think, in my students. I teach
Okay.
the link program,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think a lot of their non-participation is I'm not going to speak
Mm-hmm.
until I know it's absolutely perfect. And of course, they
Yeah.
don't realize it never will be unless you speak, and make the
Mm-hmm. The
mistakes and everything.
irony.
So it's like we're going around in this circle continually. So
Yes. Yes.
that's my experience.
Great. No, and great example. And that happens a lot with languages. We had the first example was languages as well, because it's so immediate. The feedback is so immediate. Like when you do a math equation, or do you know what I mean? There's a little bit of a space between where you can kind of be and really cultivate it and make it just so maybe for assessment. But speaking is speaking. Somebody's there listening right then. And it's like it does produce a lot of anxiety, and it makes perfect sense that it's like, I'll just wait until I know it sounds right. Or I'll just wait until I feel confident that I can put this sentence together. And, that panic, I had a student today, the panic of them not being understood. You see it in their face when you kind of take a pause and you say, oh, okay, wait. And it's like they feel just like, never mind, never mind. That's a big part of it. Great example. Sharon, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Angela.
Hmm.
I just want to be my normal me. I'd like to turn the other oriented perfectionism on its head
Let's do it.
because, okay, so I do expect others to get
Hmm.
things right. As I've said, sometimes it's crucial
Yep.
that they get it right first time. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when I see that, and when I acknowledge that that's what I'm thinking, I turn that in then to a learning experience. I don't
Great.
necessarily see it as incompetence. I
Mhm,
just see it that someone perhaps needs a help, an extra help to understand,
mhm.
and then they get the confidence once they've got it and they've been
Yeah.
able to do it, and you're patient,
Mhm.
then they will be able to flourish and do it.
Right.
Particularly with
Yes.
students, there is this notion that students who make med errors
Mhm.
may be dismissed on the spot. Okay,
Mhm.
they may be withdrawn on the spot.
Right.
That's not right. And it's
Mhm.
taken me the last 10 years to
Okay.
get people thinking a different way, because that's a learning moment.
Mhm.
Yes, it must be perfect. We know
Yes.
this, we understand this,
Mhm.
but it doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah.
So what you need to do is step back, make sure everybody's safe, but then
Mm.
use that for that
Mhm.
person then to feel confident, to then be a perfectionist and to not get it wrong the next time around.
Yes.
So that other oriented perfectionism I
Mhm.
see as a bit of a double
Yes, no,
edge.
that's
Uh,
so intriguing, because what I hear too is that the execution must be perfect. Like you said, this actually has to be perfect. It's important, it's imperative. That's the outcome. But the steps to get there, the learning, that part doesn't have to be perfect, right? So the way that we get to perfect, and we all understand it must be perfect, but in between that space is where you have the chance, like you said, to step back, learn that it needs to be perfect, and then make the change to make it perfect, right? And that messaging around, perfect the first time or that's it, doesn't really set people up for the next part when we think about what's not a fixed mindset. What we're talking about is a growth, right? You cannot grow if you're stamped out. You can't. It's over, right? Yeah. Very good example. Thank you. Yes, Leanne.
So
Mhm.
I'm fairly certain that socially prescribed perfectionism is where I stand because
Okay.
everything I did was judged. And so it was
Mm,
like, oh, well, you need to, do this better or do that better. And it was things that actually mattered to me.
I see.
Um, my parents didn't really care about grades.
Okay.
They weren't, but when it came to like, projects or things that they cared about, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm going to judge you on this because I want you to get better. So it
Got
sort
you.
of left me in a position where it's like, well, if I can't do it perfectly, I really don't want my project to be judged like this.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
yes.
that's where that came from. And then it really does uh you I became much more perfectionist because of that.
Makes
It's like,
sense.
well, if it's
Yeah.
going to be judged, then I better make sure it's good
Mm-hmm.
enough because after a while it's like, you know what, I just really like you to take the good things that I did out of this and tell me about that first, at least.
Yes, at least, right? Instead of going right into the feedback, right into like, oh, this could have been better. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes sense that that socially prescribed, from your parents becomes internalized. That makes perfect sense. It's oftentimes, the first society are your parents, right? To
Yeah.
kind of be the ones to give you that feedback. And then it turns into, can we distinguish between when it's good enough for me that I'm happy with it versus am I pleasing others? Because there's a difference.
Well, it
Something that's good
does
enough for
it
you. Yeah.
I've taken that socially prescribed
Mm-hmm.
perfectionism and made it a self-orientated perfectionism. And
Yes.
so I just you talking about those three different ones, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it moved from socially prescribed to self-orientated. It's like, if nobody
Yeah,
else is going to judge my work, then I better do it because
right.
it's
Yes.
going into the big wide world. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And obviously they all do go hand in hand. My kind of, and I'm not perfectionistic in the way, but I have a certain standard for me, and I'm hard on myself. So if anybody here is noticing, like, actually, I am kind of hard on myself, and if people heard what I said to myself, sometimes they would be like, "Oh, how could you? How can you be so mean?" But what happens is we don't always keep that contained, and sometimes it comes out with our loved ones where we don't even know that we think this way, but then they do the thing that you would never dream of because that's not okay or that's inefficient or ineffective. And you hear this meanness come out that you're like, oh, and I'm talking about me personally. I have a 9-year-old. He's just 9, but I remember myself at 9. So if he does something that I'm like, how could that be? Like, you should know. I hear myself being that way and doing that socially prescribed perfection is being that person is being like, what were you thinking? This is not okay. You should have done this instead, or this is because of that self-imposed correction that I had. And it, of course, does not compel others to, succeed all the time. Sometimes it makes people feel very kind of unsure and not feeling like they want to strive. They kind of just want to avoid sometimes. Yeah. Okay. So I think I do have a little survey. It shouldn't take you more, I don't think, more than 5 to 7 minutes. Let me know if you can. I'm so sorry for the size. If you can click on this link, let me know. If you can't, I have the link. I can share it in the chat window. And I just invite you to fill out this survey. It's supposed to be anonymous, the way I did. Are you able to click on that? Anyhow, I see now that everyone has done it. So we're just looking here just to see, where we're all at as a group. So avoidance is one of the typical procrastination behaviors. I can see here that we have some sometimes, but we do have 40% never. So putting things off basically until you know it can be perfect or not doing them at all. Two, I feel like making a mistake in front of others means I'm not capable. So we have pink here with disagree. We have 40%, sorry, 40% would disagree, and then kind of an array here with, one agree, one strongly agree, and then a strongly. So right across the board, everybody has a color there for how they feel about that statement. 3, when someone I'm mentoring or teaching gets something wrong, I feel frustrated or disappointed. So we have rarely here at 60% and 40% a few times a month, which makes sense to me, especially as facilitators. That, and it's not to say this is a bad thing, but sometimes, especially if there's certain students where you feel especially disappointed because you have supported them so much or given them kind of what you think they need, and then they still kind of come up short. I can see that. 4, have you noticed any physical symptoms like headaches, fatigue, trouble sleeping that seem to be related to your stress? Sorry for the back and self-criticism. 40% for yes, frequently, followed by occasionally at 20, rarely, and not at all. And that's just to point out that oftentimes, just like any kind of stress, that even having, these kind of high self-criticism, that perfectionism, that can be quite a bit of pressure, right? Can come out in a physical way. 5, I believe that people will judge my intelligence or ability if I fail, even temporarily. So again, right across the board from, strongly disagree, all the way to strongly agree. We have somebody in each category. And then I just asked you an open-ended question, time, thinking of a time when you put off or avoided a task because it felt too challenging. What thoughts or beliefs did you have? And this kind of goes to my next section here in my slides. What thoughts or beliefs did you have about your ability to succeed? So I believe I can get the full picture here. So I was frustrated with myself, like I wasn't good enough. So those are kind of the thoughts and the feelings. 2, I don't procrastinate for this reason. I'm not worried about failing as much as I did as a high school and uni student. I know I have to try and see where I need help to get it done. I search for the answers if I don't know. So for that reason, right? To not have that kind of negative cycle of thoughts and those really bad feelings. That's similar to me, that it makes me feel really uncomfortable to procrastinate, like physically uncomfortable. 3, I need more knowledge to be able to do what I want to do to the degree that I need to do it. Okay, wonderful. 4, I tend not to avoid challenging tasks. I like the challenge and I like tight deadlines. Excellent. And 5, I felt like I wasn't ready. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, so it maybe wasn't a project for me, even though I really wanted to do it. So sometimes using that information, that it's not working out, or it feels too challenging, that maybe it's not a good fit. If I'm having such a big reaction of like, I'm actually not going to do this, this can be information maybe that it's not a good fit, or it's something that's not meant, for me to do. Well, thank you. Thank you for filling that out. Just, for me kind of to see where we're all at. And I got a lot from our conversation as well. But, some interactivity. Let's see here. I'm going to go back into my slides. Keep it going. And Sarah, I don't want to leave you hanging. Do you want to? We all kind of went around and just shared why this topic was interesting to us, or that we felt like joining the workshop tonight. Totally optional. If you're like, I'm good, that's good too.
I might be on the other extreme of this. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm a straightforward, like good is good enough. But it means I challenge when students are like, it's not perfect. I don't want to do the work, or I don't want to try because it's not perfect. It's not perfect. And I'm like, not perfect's the name of the game. Like, show me a mistake. Let's work with it. Come on. So I have a really hard time more navigating within my students, because that's not, I'm a procrastinator, but I'm not I like working to a deadline, I think is why I'm a procrastinator, but I have a really hard time getting my head around why, like, that perfectionism as a goal, because it's not my go-to.
Got you. Okay, that's so interesting. What I love that. I love the kind of the striking the balance here with the extremes, right? And because you have that insight already, what you said about, like, it's not about perfection, it's about learning and growing and doing. That's actually what we're going to be talking about in the next few slides, about how, that when perfectionism becomes maladaptive, when it gets in the way of learning, if it gets in the way of growth, it is problematic, right? So somebody who is encouraging students to just do it anyway, and know that it's not perfect and then be okay with that, right? It's a really refreshing take. And again, it's interesting to learn about. Yeah, it's a thoughtful exercise for you to come and see about, like, what is all this perfectionism stuff? Like, what's going on for these people? My God. Right?
Yeah.
So, like I said, perfectionism is the fixed mindset in disguise. So, if you're not familiar with fixed mindset, it comes out of this theory of, and they really kind of, it shows up a lot in educational institutions. Certainly in post-secondary, we talk about a growth mindset, which is what we're trying to promote always. So when we looked at fixed mindset, though, specifically, these are the things that you might notice or see in yourself or in others that we're trying to undo through our approach with our students and through our approach with ourselves. So number one, fear of imperfection, which may lead to task avoidance. So perfectionists often delay tasks because they fear their work won't meet unrealistic standards. All or nothing thinking. If they can't do something perfectly, they may avoid starting it altogether. Over planning and over analyzing. Perfectionists spend excessive time preparing or researching instead of taking action, so leading to delays. So they might do all of this work and set up all this planning, and it looks really like, wow, you're really immersed, but the execution of all of that just never really happens. So that can be with a project, that can be with a DIY home project, that can be with schoolwork, but there's all this kind of pre-work, all this research and planning, but then the actual task seems to never happen. Right? Something called paralysis by analysis. Constantly questioning every decision can result in inaction and missed deadlines, right? So always thinking, but is this right? Is this the best way? Is this the perfect way? Is this exactly how I should do it? It might be somebody looking at a slide for half an hour figuring out what color scheme it should be because they want to make sure it's just so. Paralyzes the person to move forward. Last minute rush and burnout. Work is often completed under extreme pressure at the last minute, reducing quality and increasing stress, right? So because inevitably this person does have responsibilities. They don't want to fail out of school or be suspended. They will do it, but it's because of that waiting time due to perfectionism or perhaps that procrastination, that it's not out of perfectionism, just the nature. Some people just procrastinate. There could be a last minute rush, low satisfaction with completed work. So then even after finishing a task, they might feel dissatisfied and dwell. And that kind of reinforces that the future task is something I want to put off. Right? Look how I'm embarrassed. I handed that in. I don't think it was very good. I feel bad about it. That doesn't really set somebody up to be like super motivated to do the next task. So that's just kind of, sorry to go so quickly there, but those are kind of your typical ways that you might see somebody with perfectionism think and behave. And then I wanted to switch gears. I wanted to switching gears, wanted to change it up. There's a cute little brain there doing some exercises because the growth mindset, which is the opposite of perfectionism, basically says, that's why I have a picture of brain here, is that when you struggle, literally, when you struggle, when you don't do things just so, when you make mistakes, this builds new neural pathways. The more you challenge your brain, the stronger it literally gets. So this is not just a really cute metaphor. Actually, so actually, it's helpful to build those neural pathways. That's information that you can start to tell even young kids, because kids do have a really hard time. Kids feel very vulnerable and disappointed, and they're not as big or strong as everybody else, and they're always being reminded of this information. So saying that's actually your brain working out and getting buff and getting strong so that it's able to learn in the future is actually a really interesting way to think of it. Why? Because it invites challenge. It invites struggles. It invites discomfort. It invites kind of that yucky space in between not knowing something and perfecting it, because that space in between is actually super duper important. So I just kind of like the visual and that quote. So the idea of growth mindset is, yeah, we actually really want to be bad at things sometimes. We want to make mistakes. That's the only way that we can learn. And we all heard this a million times, but it's not until you experience it that you really get it. So again, just with the group, anyone wants to share, was there ever a time where you really struggled at something and you were really like, this feels so uncomfortable, or just this space right here is super challenging or is triggering a lot of anxiety, but then I did it anyway. And now, fill in the blank. Has that ever happened for anybody? This literally happening, you felt the growth?
The first time I posted a YouTube video, which I haven't shared yet,
Yep.
but I literally felt my brain break and expand. Like I got new muscles. I was
Yes.
exhausted afterwards, but it's like, okay, I did it. I at least did it. So that was kind of cool.
Excellent. Good. Yeah, and so sometimes you might notice it in your students where something they finally they made the awkward error or that seemed like, wow, they really don't know what's happening and they kind of just it's like almost like a zip and it's a growth. There's something changes. They get it and it shows in their demeanor, in their behavior, in their expression. Something a real change has happened. What a what a shame to never experience that. You will never experience that if you don't put yourself out there. If you don't risk, right? If you don't risk and you don't challenge, you never get that feeling of like, oh, okay, it makes sense, it clicks, and what a disservice to yourself, to your own development, right? So my little story is about statistics. I'm not a mathematically inclined person whatsoever, and I didn't know psychology had statistics in the curriculum. I had no idea. I thought, ooh, psychology, we're going to talk about feelings all day, and I'm going to write about case studies, and isn't that cute? And then in second year, second semester, it was like, oh, this is when we start our year-long stats course. You're going to do research methods. You're going to conduct your own experiments, and then I want you to gather all of those numbers and put them into a formula and understand, the variance and understand the correlational coefficients and all of those confidence intervals, you name it. And I thought, oh, okay, thanks for everything. Thank you. I tried. Right away, I bowed out. I was like, this wasn't for me. I really thought I was going to be a psychologist. Too bad, so sad. Um, but that wasn't an option, right? So you have parents who pay for tuition or help you, and you've invested all this time. So that was my growth mindset. Absolutely challenging. Cried and cried and cried. And then one day, I just looked at the screen and I was like, I see it. Like I kind of see it and I got it. And then I was almost like you had taken a drug. I felt euphoric for like a week because I understood statistics. So that's my story sometimes to my kids when they're crying about something's too hard. I said, don't cheat yourself out of this experience or cheat yourself out of this experience of getting it. It's the best feeling ever. What a shame to lose out on that. Okay, so moving forward, when we reduce, oh, Sharon, you have to leave, no problem. Thank you for letting me know. Sharon had to step out, but she thanked us and she had a good time. Okay, so reducing fixed mindset. So what is growth mindset? What am I talking about? It means believing that your abilities and intelligence can improve with effort, feedback, and practice. So it focuses on progress, not perfection. And this is true, which is really nice that this is validated by research. There are many, many articles. There has been science behind this that you can actually develop even intelligence, right? Which oftentimes we have been kind of brought up to believe that, you're smarter, you're not smarter, you have a certain IQ or you don't. That's all BS, really. It really is. We can all become quote unquote smarter through effort. So that's the growth mindset. Why it's the opposite of perfectionism? Because perfectionism says what? I must get it right the first time or I fail. That's a perfectionist. I must get it right. It's a failure. It must be perfect or it's the worst. There's no in between, right? 100% or zero, that's it. Growth mindset says mistakes help me learn. I can get better with time, right? So mistakes are not an indication of a failure. Mistakes is information. Mistake is information of where I need to learn. Where do I need to focus my energy? That's why assessments are so crucial in school because hopefully you have a good teacher who gives you feedback and they tell you, this was great. I loved this. Wonderful. Good job. This, what happened here? Then you know where to look. You say, oh, okay, yes, I really didn't know that, I guess. It focuses your energy in the right spot. So here's my example. So a perfectionist might avoid presenting in a meeting unless they've rehearsed it 10 times, right? So they might just be like, I'm not even going to try until it's tip top, exactly perfect. I don't stumble over any of my words. I know exactly the examples. My questions are perfect. My slides are wonderful. I've timed it to the T. And if it's not there, I'm not doing it, basically, is the feeling. Someone with a growth mindset might still feel nervous. That's natural. Feel stressed, upset about making the presentation, but they see the presentation itself as a learning opportunity. So the actual presentation itself is actually seen as a chance to practice. It's not an outcome. It's not a product that you are being evaluated on. It's actually an opportunity to get better. So if you start to frame experiences in the sense of, oh, wow, this is my chance to learn and grow. This is my chance to really get good at insert the blank. You will be much more open to those experiences versus if you're thinking, this is my chance to be evaluated. This is a chance for others to judge and watch and tell me if it was good or bad. That's going to set you up for a very different feeling when you go into that kind of, scenario. So very much like the students in the Link program where speaking and having conversations is about evaluation, about you're going to judge and see and give me feedback about my skills versus, wow, I'm talking to a real native Canadian right now. This is born and raised Canada. What a great opportunity for me to practice some of these colloquialisms or some of these expressions I heard on TV yesterday. There's a different type of student, right? Thinking about everything we just saw, thinking about if you are, facilitating or you have a system around, teaching your students, what changes could you implement in your teaching to reduce fixed mindset tendency in students? So what are some things that promote the growth? What promote that kind of curiosity, looking at learning like an experience versus an evaluation or an opportunity to be judged, basically? Yes, Sarah.
So in that case, something like
Mm-hmm.
rewarding or praising kind of, I want to say chance taking or something like
Yes.
would that be something that like maybe not in a assessment situation, but in a day-to-day, like, oh yeah, that's not
Yes.
quite there, but wow, that's a great try.
Yes,
Like, would that
absolutely.
help? Like,
That
that was a
helps.
perfect try. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Um,
Perfect. Exactly. Because you're noticing the effort,
right.
noticing the attempt, and giving feedback on the attempt of just like that was really hard. Wow, thanks for taking a stab at it. Or, I
Yeah.
noticed, or even if you can find one little piece that is correct, let's say
Mhm.
99% is like, but you really like they have bubble writing that's so beautiful. You might even say something about that. And like, I love that you tried. Thank you so much for participating. Your writing is gorgeous. My gosh, look at that. But, so kind of
Yeah.
focusing on, the positive and also the attempt. That was hard. Thank you. I noticed you. I noticed you trying.
Is turning it to that side of saying, like, what can we learn from that? Like, oh, look what's happening here.
Yes.
Where did that come from? What can we learn from
Mm-hmm.
that? Is that going to also kind of be that
Yes.
moving towards a positive, the seeing the positive in a growth mindset?
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's seeing a positive, yes, but growth mindset isn't scared of challenge either. So we're not trying to kind of shy away from noticing the challenge and the risk taking and the
Yeah.
discomfort. Certainly. So it doesn't always have to be positive, but using it as an opportunity for everyone to learn,
Right.
right? So
Right.
because, and I promise you, oftentimes in groups, one person is saying it or experiencing it, there's five other people in the audience or there that think the same thing. So for you to say like, oh my gosh, let's take a pause there because I bet a lot of other people were thinking that. That makes sense. If and you kind of acknowledge that this is not some rare occurrence that like only you thought that. Yeah, okay. Everybody else probably shared that and I can see. And people are usually pretty supportive. I've noticed with students that they will speak up. Finally, some of the students will say, oh, me too, or I thought you meant that, or I was really confused for that last slide too. I didn't know what you meant. But it usually takes the first person, right, to take that risk and to challenge, feel that challenge and open themselves up to perhaps feeling embarrassed or whatever it might be. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Leanne.
Um, I taught in Korea for just about 10 years. I taught ESL.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
so one of the things I noticed was the way culturally they teach
Hmm.
is this is the right answer. And if you
Yeah.
don't get that right answer, I'm going to publicly destroy you.
Yeah.
So students
Oh,
learn very, very, very early that wrong answers equals social ostracization, which
Wow.
means by the time they would get to my classroom, I taught the preschool kids. That was the
Mhm,
funnest because they had no
mhm.
inhibitions. We could
Yes.
rock around the
Have
classroom, but the
fun. Yeah.
yeah, or I would ask
Yes.
questions that have no right answer to them.
Oh my gosh, that
Uh,
must have been hard, right? Yes.
brain breaking, brain breaking.
Yeah.
It's like, is that the right answer? Yes. But
Yeah.
he said that. Yes, that's the right
Yes.
answer too.
Right? No, perfect example because you showed the opposite, right? It doesn't take long before you have students who are terrified of being wrong. And if you're so scared, right? If you can't risk being wrong, you don't learn. There's no room for growth because you already became perfect. Is that true of anybody? I don't know anybody who woke up and was just an Olympic medal, bobsled person or a gymnast or wrote the Nobel Prize. Like everybody knows kind of intuitively, like, yeah, they probably worked hard and this and that, but we don't apply it sometimes to ourselves and certainly in that culture to children, which are the most apt to make all the mistakes. My kids are wrong all the time, but they're kids. They don't actually know a lot. They haven't lived for many years, so I accept that about them. It's like, yeah, you don't actually understand a lot of things, but that's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So let's move on to some of the ideas. And for the purpose of time, obviously, and we're getting up to the last 20 minutes here, there are a variety of ways to support a classroom that has a growth mindset as kind of the mood or the vibe. Let's say there's a growth mindset, and encouraging mistakes. So we have the first one, encouraging growth mindset, of course, normalizing mistakes of learning. So just keeping that in the vernacular, always just saying, oh, wow, we're doing so much learning today, you guys. Are we ever learning, right? Not an assessment of good or bad, right or wrong. Three, reducing unnecessary pressure. So sometimes having flexible deadlines, having supportive feedback along the way can be really helpful to those that kind of do that procrastination game or that perfectionism that it's like, you know what, I'm not that worried about you handing it in exactly at 4 o'clock today. If you think you need more time just to do the references really well or whatever it is, by Saturday morning, sometimes that can, create kind of a more supportive and less focus on, what Sharon said. You do it right the first time or you're out, right? So you don't hand it in on Friday at 4, it's a zero. Period. It's a zero. Don't even bother on Saturday. So the opposite of that. Thinking more about growth mindset, what we've kind of discussed about it, what is the way that we could perhaps reframe these statements? What would you say, right? What might you say to start getting even students to start thinking in a more growth mindset, in a way that we're inviting challenges, we're making mistakes is a learning opportunity. What does that look like? So number one, I can't keep up with these younger students. I'm just not tech savvy enough. So you have a student saying like, no, I'm having a hard time. I can't keep up with them. I'm always getting it wrong. I'm not tech savvy enough, period. Like that is an actual, core trait of mine. I do not have the capacity to understand technology. How could you reframe that statement with a growth mindset? So just thinking about that, I might go through all of them and we'll return. So number two is every time I get feedback on my writing, I feel like I'm not cut out for this program. So the feedback, the response from the teacher is information to the student, to them, that they're not meant to be here. So they're not seeing the feedback as constructive criticism. I'm showing you where you can improve. It's me telling you on repeat, gosh, you're bad. Like, oh, I don't know if you should even be in this program, right? And then for three, I didn't pass the course the first time. I don't think I belong in college, right? So unfortunate, this does happen. I've had many students who need to retake a course, especially in academic upgrading, and they might just think, never mind, forget it. Forget it. I thought I wanted to get my high school diploma. It's too hard. It's not for me. So I don't think I should be here. So those are the three challenges. Those are kind of, I was trying to think of what I've kind of heard or what, other facilitators have told me. Does anybody, I'm just leaving it open, any of the statements, you don't have to go through one, two, three, but does anybody have an idea for any of these three where it's like, you know what I could say to a student who said this? And it doesn't have to just promote growth mindset. It could also just be supportive. It could show self-compassion, just something that would get them out of this. Yes, Leanne.
For number one,
Mm-hmm.
that's a perfect way of having them teach me something. So
Mm-hmm.
for
Yes.
me to be in that vulnerable role of, I don't know what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And for them to feel a little bit frustrated that I'm not learning. It's like,
Yeah.
this is so easy. Why can't you do this? And it just
Mm-hmm.
helps me and helps them too. It's like, oh, it's okay if you
Yes.
don't always get it the first time.
I love that. So you're role modeling that vulnerability, right? You're role modeling like, yeah, I don't really know. Can you show me? And I'm using this as an opportunity to learn, not as an indication that I'm not capable or that something is wrong because I don't understand how to use this app or whatever. Yeah. Awesome. Chantel.
I was also going to address challenge one. I
Yeah.
find when I teach clinical students, and there's lots of typing. Like nurses spend a lot of time on computer doing documentation, and I have quite a few students who just really struggle with typing. We're talking fingers or pressing caps lock to do it, an uppercase
my
letter. I
gosh.
didn't even know
Yes.
that was a thing, but
It's a thing.
apparently, yeah. So I usually try and make a game out of it. I pull up
Amazing.
like typingtest.com. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that.
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up at a school where we had shoe boxes over our hands, over our keyboards, and we were never allowed to look at our hands.
Amazing. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was lovely. So, but yeah, so I just trying to like facilitate with games or make it more fun or just any sort of way to practice, not necessarily
Yes.
in clinical, but just on their own time to help improve. Because if you don't understand the program, that's okay. But at least if you can type a little bit faster, it will improve some of that time management in there.
Yes. And I love that you said about practicing because any practice is good. You never go backwards. That's what's so amazing is that even if we don't see, progress right away, sometimes we think like, well, then it's worthless. But progress is always progress. You literally cannot go backwards. So you typing all this week, even on Monday, you come back and you're like, it's pretty much the same. Could it ever be worse than it was last Monday? And the answer is always no. It's an impossibility. So that's another way around, practicing feels uncomfortable. Maybe it feels embarrassing. Maybe it's frustrating. Like you're doing something on repeat and you're just like, why can't I do this? But that's because you're learning, right? So that's the language around learning is uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that. I always say like quiet nurse is a scary nurse. Like nurses never know everything. Like you're always learning and asking. And if you're quiet, people think you know it all or you're too afraid. I find that with the students.
No, that's such a good point. It's true. It's like that is scary. You should always be asking questions and checking and confirming and saying like, wait, is that right? Did I hear that? If you're not, then that does make for a scary nurse. I can see that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So again, just these things come up and sometimes in the moment, and this is not just with our students, obviously, but in life, we have kids, we have a spouse, we have people, and sometimes we do say things like, oh, that's not true. You're great at it, right? We kind of have this impulse to be like, no, 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 no. What do you mean? No, my God, that's fine. No, you're really good. Versus actually acknowledging like, yeah, that sounds really hard, but this is an opportunity to learn or grow, or I wonder. So just being more curious about it or giving them even the example about the brain and how, even saying like, do you feel really uncomfortable? And they'll say, yeah, I feel terrible. Oh my gosh, you're learning. You must be learning. That's so great. Just helping them reframe it. Trust me, with my own kids, it's easy to jump in and say, oh, you play piano? Great. It's the best. I love that song versus like, yeah, you know what? It's really, that one part is really hard for you, but you keep on trying. That's amazing. And you're frustrated and you did it anyway. And my son, he's only 9, he will be like, yeah, I hated it. I was mad the whole time. And he'll stomp upstairs. But me not reacting with like, it's fine. No, you're the best is helpful. Yeah. Here's more about that growth mindset, just to kind of, it's more of a reiteration. I'm not trying to throw so much information at you. But yeah, like we said, normalize mistakes as a part of learning. Sometimes it really helps when you share your own past struggles with a difficult subject, and how persistence helped you improve, right? So it's nice to hear kind of one of those stories of a facilitator shares, or your mom or dad, or somebody showing a vulnerability, right? And saying like, oh my gosh, are you serious? I dropped out of my first year, what it is. Or I had a job where I was fired in the first hour because they were like, you are the worst server we have ever seen. Like, these things happen to people, right? It normalizes it and it humanizes it, right? You're not this all-knowing, person. You make mistakes all the time. Here's a classroom strategy. So after an assignment, instead of just grading, ask the students to reflect, right? So saying things like, what was the biggest challenge in this task? And what did you learn from it? So yes, you did the thing. Yes, I graded it. But thinking for you, what was the biggest challenge? What was the hardest part for you? And exclusive, this is the most important, what did you learn from it, right? So it moves the focus away from the outcome to the process of learning, process of challenge. And it shows even for the facilitator that they're interested in that too. They're not just hyper focused on outcome, assessment, pass, fail. You're saying like, hey, what did you think? Did you like that? Did you learn anything? Was that interesting? That helps everyone feel a little bit less kind of heightened, I find. Two, shift focus from outcomes to effort and progress. So instead of praising only high grades, acknowledge effort and improvement by saying things like, I can see how much effort you put into this revision. Your arguments are much stronger now, right? So sometimes, and this is more kind of assessment, but sometimes when it's like, it's still not great, it's still like, ooh, but they took your feedback and they tried to improve it, you focus on that and say, yeah, I can see you put effort into this. We all use that language, right? Like really good effort. And then specifically, this argument is really strong. Because if your feedback was like, none of your arguments have any supporting points, and then the next time they do like 1 out of 5, then you will notice that one and say, like, this one, look at this one. This is a really good argument, right? So it's concrete actions. You did the revision. It's not a personal trait, obviously, right? So something that they did to improve, that's what you can focus on. So replace fixed mindset language with growth mindset language. So again, more examples. You're so talented at writing. A teacher might say, your writing has really improved because of your hard work on structure and clarity. So again, showing the effort. There's growth mindset phrase chart I've seen in classrooms, by the way. There's like, I think there's a poster you can even get on like Scholastics, but there is kind of a phrase chart, like things that you can kind of point to or say or encourage students to say themselves when they find themselves being really hard on themselves or avoiding a task or being focused on kind of outcome. Something like, I can't do presentations. I'm still learning how to be more confident speaking. There's another one I think I have here. I just want to show, no, I'm going to go back. Sorry. That's another handout. I have a handout with more of those phrases that you can add to kind of like a whiteboard or like a little handout, about how do we have that growth mindset language. A big one, by the way, before I send you that handout, is yet, right? So using the word yet at the end of the sentence can be really helpful. So I'm not very good at whatever, and then you can say yet. That's it. Because usually the sentence stops at, I'm so bad at math, right? I'm not good at math yet, right? But we're going to get there. We're going to get better. We're not going to be the best, maybe, but I think we'll get better. So it's this yet. So I have a bunch of those, I think 5 or 6 that I can send you that kind of allows the person to feel the feelings, allows yourself to feel the feelings, but then encourages reframing in a growth mindset way. Yet, right? So for self-compassion and resilience, here's an example, again, to relate. I also struggle with public speaking, but I kept practicing and now it's much easier. The strategy here is encourage students to reframe struggles positively using structured reflection prompts. So things like this. What is one thing that felt hard this week? And what's a step you can take to improve, right? So talking about the hard thing, not avoiding it, but head on, saying what was like the hardest part of this week and really discussing that and then making a plan. What's one thing you can do to get a little better? And they might say, oh, I can review the practice questions, or I'm going to talk with my teacher after class, or, having a concrete plan, also that control helps reduce that anxiety, and promotes that growth mindset. So that's I really like that one actually, to reframe it. When you have a growth mindset, you're no longer thinking about failure or success, right? So there shouldn't be a fear of failure because the focus is not on success. It's the focus on learning. So I give a big speech in my EA and HSPD programs when I do the course outline, when we talk about like ChatGPT, that kind of thing, all of that. And I say, you know, if the point of being here is to learn and be a very knowledgeable expert in psychology, in supporting students, if that's the goal, that you're going to walk out of here having an expertise, having the knowledge, right? Who are you doing the disservice to? If you pull one over on me and you write a whole paper with the help of ChatGPT, let's say you do, and I mark it and you get 98%, that's great. But if your focus is on achievement, then you won 100%. If your focus is on learning and growth and development, you failed big time. The biggest failure, actually, because you learned nothing. You spent your money and your time so that you could leave and say, I don't even know who Piaget is, right? I teach child development. I don't even know what Vygotsky is. Who's this? What does that mean? I don't know what to do if a kid acts out. What does that mean then? So I, the expression of, learning and challenging and becoming an expert in whatever the subject is, that is the point, not winning or losing or getting like, the top grade, right? So we can model and reinforce these strategies. We can have the supportive learning environment, and then we can really talk about effort over outcome. Perfectionism and procrastination are connected, not always, but oftentimes are connected. Perfectionism can impact success and well-being in positive and negative ways. Growth mindset does help to reduce perfectionism, and learning over perfection helps students thrive. So when you're just there for the sake of learning versus perfection, then you actually end up doing better. It's kind of funny because you do become a really good student and probably do get really, really good grades as a consequence, not as the subject or the purpose, but as a consequence of that learning focus. Good. All right. So I'll let you go. Thank you again so much. And
Thank you.
hopefully I'll see you at a Christmas party somewhere or a potluck or stampede breakfast.